try going live using that. You can't just hit go live because you have to start the process from in Zoom.
Oh.
And try going live using that. You can't just hit go live because you have to start the process from in Zoom.
Oh.
And try going live using that. You can't just hit go live because you have to start the process from in Zoom.
Oh.
And try going live using that. You can't just hit go live because you have to start the process from in Zoom.
Oh.
And try going live using that. You can't just hit go live because you have to
All right.
Hi, Ben.
Hey, Leslie. Long time no see.
I know. It's been a while.
Yeah, super excited for this this session.
So thanks for inviting us. I'll introduce you to my colleague here. This is Mike Hilton. Mike Hilton is Benjamin Whiting.
Hi, Ben.
Oh, hi. Hello. It seems like there's feedback.
I know. It's been a while.
Yeah.
Super
There's
excited
feedback
for this this session. Is there feedback when I talk? Is it Leslie's fault? Everybody else is muted. Is there feedback when I talk?
No,
You're all good.
I'm not sure where the feedback is coming from, to be honest. Uni, do you have do you have like the Zoom open and the stream open? Because that will cause feedback.
Is there feedback when I talk?
No,
You're all good.
I'm not sure where the feedback is.
I kind of like this piece. It's kind of cool, actually.
Yeah, actually, no, it was me. I was the culprit. Uni had asked if to check the stream, and I did, and I just totally forgot to close the tab. I'm like, wait a minute. There was something I forgot to do.
Perfect.
Oh, and by the way, nice to meet you, Mike. Didn't mean to. I was just like distracted trying to diagnose what was going on.
That's okay. Being a moderator is hard.
For sure.
Well, sorry, it's if you one of you can check if everything is going okay.
Oh yeah, the stream was still going fine. That's why we were getting feedback.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, sorry about this. Always this technical problem, and I was supposed to be able to stream with my account, but somehow YouTube doesn't let me, so I had to borrow Ben's account for the webinar streaming. So anyway, welcome everybody, and we're super excited to have Michael Hilton, who's scientist and engineer, and Leslie Barre, who's a composer, and they work together to build Slick, and we'll learn about this interactive sound installation. And yeah, so welcome. And we have our Vice President, Benjamin Whiting here, and then also our board member director and percussion director, Kevin Von Kampen. So welcome, everybody. Yeah, so I think we'll just, I guess we'll let Michael and Leslie speak about the Slick, and then we'll open up for questions and yeah, other comments. So here we are. It's all yours.
Thank you very much. I'll start out, and I am going to share my screen and share with you also some video clips about the Slick. And to start off with, SLIC stands for Sound Light Interaction Stick. And there's a picture of the SLIC right in the corner of the screen there. And before I get started telling you some technical details, and then Leslie will give the exciting portion of the talk about how do you compose for these things, I want to start out by showing you 1 minute of video from a performance from the 2nd of February that was held at the University of Southern Florida. And it included dancers, and it included some wonderful percussionists that Kevin's group had available for us. And let me set the stage of what you're seeing. So there are 5 slicks that are in the corner of a performance space. And there are dancers from USF that are going to be putting on a performance. And the slicks have been programmed so that when you put your hands near them or a body part near them, they're going to play some music and some sound clips that Leslie has composed. So most of the sound that you'll be hearing is coming from the slicks. Some of it is coming from the percussionists that were accompanying him. And I'm taking it impromptu way there. So it will start off, we're in sort of the earlier phase of the performance, and we'll see that the focus is really on the dancers. And then almost a minute into it, the dancers are going to converge around one single slick, and they're going to be activating. So let me get this rolling and share with you a little bit about, what a performance with slicks looks like. Okay. So it was really a wonderful experience to be a part of that. It was very dynamic. So I want to tell you a little bit about the hardware. I'm a computer scientist. I'm an engineer. And so I have built and designed this hardware that I just threw a bunch of capabilities in there in the hope that we would be able to do something with them. And so the first thing that you notice when you look at one of the slicks is this column down the center, which has got lights in it. There are 60 light emitting diodes that are individually programmable along the column, and there's 60 on the front and 60 on the back. And you can individually change the color of them and animate them in whatever way you're creative enough to do that. So that's the central visual component of the slicks, is this light animation on there. At the top of the slick, there are 6 ultrasonic distance sensors. They're these little black looking dots that go all the way around the slick that allow you to detect if there's an object getting close to the slick. The range can be set programmatically to be anywhere from within 2 inches or 6 feet of the device. And so depending on the software that happens to be running on the slick at the time, the slick can react in a variety of different ways. The performance that you just saw was programmed so that the slicks were placed into 2 groups, 3 in the front and 3 in the back, that if someone got within 1 foot of them, it would trigger off playing a sound file on there. And while I've got a picture in detail of the head up here, what you also see these little bitty holes and the thing that looks kind of like a hat at the very top, that's a speaker. It's a mid-range speaker that is embedded at the top of the slick. At the base of the slick, in that pyramidal shape, there's also a woofer. A 5-inch woofer is down there. And together, these 2 speakers are connected into a 20-watt stereo sound system that is controlled by a computer that's in the base of the slick. There's also a microphone that is embedded in the slick that will allow the slick to react to sounds if it's programmed to do that. And speaking of programming, so there is a small computer on board, a microcontroller that's called an ESP32. If you're an electronics geek, you might be familiar with this chip. And it can be programmed in either MicroPython or C++ to make this thing stand up and bag or dance, whatever you want to do with it. There's an SD card on board that will let you save the sound files that you want to play on there. And the chip also has wireless networking, both Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. So it's a very versatile device. It can be programmed in zillions of different ways. And we've only started to just begin investigating what can we do with this device. So here's a picture of what's inside that little pyramid that we have. It's mostly speaker. So there is an enclosed 5-inch woofer that's down at the bottom. And then clinging to the sides of the pyramid is a power supply and a custom circuit board. And here's a close-up of the circuit board with all the goodies that are in there. That ESP32 processor that I mentioned is right there front and center. In the middle, there's the SD card, and then the sound system chips are on the right there. So in terms of what kind of modes of interaction that you can have with this device, I've got listed out the ones that we kind of designed into it. We haven't necessarily explored all of these things in a performance setting yet. What you saw in the video was an interactive playback that got triggered by the distance sensors. That if you set one of these off, then it can play a sound file, and that's the primary mode that we've investigated so far. There's also just a static choreographed mode where you can program in a certain light sequence and sound sequence. I'm going to show you a video of what one of those looks like. You probably will recognize the song. So I'm not particularly creative, in terms of, a lighting designer. But that's just something to give you an idea of what some of the capabilities are. It's also possible to dynamically generate sound on the devices themselves. And so, for instance, this is a really simple theremin-like device where I'm just controlling the volume and frequency of a pure tone generator with my distance my hands are from the ultrasonic sensors on it. So it's kind of like a theremin. I'd also like to point out that these devices, they do have that wireless network in them, and you can program them to interact with each other and respond to people. So one slick can let all the other slicks know what it's up to, so that you can create synchronized activity that gets triggered by people or sounds or whatever. And so this next video clip, it just shows that this is possible. And so here's two slicks. They've each been assigned a color. One of them is red and the other is blue. And as I approach the one that's lit with red and trigger it, it's going to send a message over to the blue one, which is going to then display its top half in red to indicate, yep, I got the message here. And then you'll see the same thing. The blue is going to send the red a message when I get near it. We also have the ability to use open sound control. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it is the successor to MIDI as a way to let devices communicate with each other over the internet. And the slicks can be used as input devices to drive another computer, a server, for instance, or a laptop that has some sound generation software like Super Collider or Max MSP or Pure Data on it, any program that can receive and respond to OSC commands. These devices can do that on there. So that opens up a whole new area of interactive sound generation and performance than just the devices in and by themselves. And then finally, I mentioned there is that microphone, and we really haven't done much with it. You know, I've set them up so that they're volume meters, so that if you put them in a performance space, the lights will go up as the sound goes up. And I expect to have a graphic equalizer display shortly, to where it does a frequency analysis of the sound, and each slick can be a different frequency band and respond to those. So that is the technical side of this presentation. And so I'm gonna now stop sharing, and I am gonna let Leslie talk about the creative side of this, and how do you compose for these or incorporate them into performance.
Thanks, Mike. Yes, so when about a year ago, Mike approached me saying, hey, let's meet for coffee. I have this work on this project. And right away, as a composer, the possibilities were endless, and it was an immediate yes. And I think what was so wonderful about this project is the variety. It's essentially Mike's giving a composer a buffet. And each one of these pieces is what to do with these capabilities, right? And for me, it's in a way, it's a problem solving, right? What kind of sonic space does this piece want to be? And in my work, before meeting Mike, I've always been interested in performer movement and peripatetic techniques and displacement. So again, nothing really new. Like Henry Brent has this, Thea Musgrave, Stockhausen, right? So, but I've always been kind of interested in what happens if you have a performer move. And I've worked with dance in the past too as well. So I've always find kineticism and visualizing sonic space as part of my work. So when this collaboration came across my path, it was just, okay, options are endless. What can we do? So, and what does a piece want to be? So, and what's wonderful about working with Mike is that every time I meet with him, there's always something new that he's creating, right? So it's, again, another color to the palette that we can play with. So from a compositional standpoint, it's, for me, I'm thinking, okay, what are these different pieces going to be? And I think coming with something like this could be daunting, right? There's so many different variables, there's so many different directions. But for me, it went, okay, what if we just kind of go, what if each one of these different pieces, almost like different sketches, right? And what do we want out of it, right? So for the first piece collaboration we did was I.O., which was, I utilized my sonic journaling from the island of Mauritius. So again, dealing with environmental issues, so you're hearing wildlife, also different variants of water, so that being with Indian Ocean, also a cyclone rain, but a very much different piece. And with I.O., we wanted to, let's try step one. What would be if you set up this kind of sound design in which it would be one triggering at a time, right? So, but with that piece, it was definitely more in a passive, and where Slick was a stationary object, 7 of them, in which audience members would walk passively kind of through this piece. So in a way, that was step one, I think, in these different kind of sketches or different case studies. So in that interaction, very much trigger one, lights up and presents the sound and creates this kind of fabric in the space, so very much open. So this next piece with the collaboration with Tampa City Ballet and USF was this idea of, okay, now we have dance. And this, I'm very, very, very excited about this, because in this piece, slicks are not going to be the forefront, right? Slicks are going to be essentially why I wanted to create a sonic environment in which this intersection between light and movement, that it didn't take away. It's part of the space and part of that environment in which you have dancing going through. So I really wanted to create a non-hierarchical sonic environment in which the essentially sound design and the slicks are part of the performance space. Almost in a way, for me, I visualized the slicks as an extension of the dancers' bodies, right? And in which they're taking control. So as a composer, that became really interesting because I wanted, with that in mind, that there's be dance involved, and also the fact that in a way it gave the dancers a puzzle to play with. I think the parameters of this were we're set up, essentially create this piece in which we're going to have a third party be part of the space and part of the environment. How do they react, right? So they had their set of choreography, right, set, but also this concept of not necessarily understanding what's going to happen, right? And how do the dancers utilize slick, right? Where slick becomes part of that space, in which the dancers themselves are the music makers, they're the sound makers. So, and how that kind of interaction between, so that you saw the center movement with the fabric, the dancers actually activating the sound and how they're utilizing all their movement. So in a way, it created this really lovely fabric. And with USF percussion, that added a really wonderful layer that I remember talking to Mike afterwards going, that's the next step, these different like sonic strata that we're playing with. So so for this kind of luminescent piece, it was very kind of exciting. So part of my kind of compositional process with this was, again, as Mike delineated out, that you have all these different sensors, right? And so we thought, again, kind of thinking composition, also realistically going, okay, so how are we going to accomplish this piece? One, what does it want to say? Two, what is our case study that we want to play with, right? So what are our parameters? Again, we have this big buffet. What do we want to use, right? Almost and play with. And again, because of the variance, right? We don't want to give, in a way, I wanted to give, in a way, of repetition. So something who, if a dancer reappears, again, they're creating the puzzle so they can kind of figure out without having these too many different variants in this piece, in which it wouldn't take away necessarily from that. So with this kind of setup, then it also went to the idea of, okay, well, realistic setup, right? Kind of just basic, going, okay, how are we going to set this up? What's going to be the easiest setup? And particularly, I think the next step, working with Max MSP and Super Collider, that's a whole different setup in that idea, right? To interface whole thing. So we found that approach for this particular project was a little bit too complicated at the moment for this piece. So we knew, but I also found that in a way, because the slicks are part of this environment, I also wanted the sound to be coming from that sound source rather than in activating something else. So I think there's something very tangible, again, going back to that idea that the sound's part is an extension of the dancer's bodies, that they're activating that sound in which the sound source is coming from that space. So I think there's something very physical. Again, we're thinking about it, sounds very, very concrete, right? It's very tangible. So in a way, that was kind of our parameters in this specific piece. So with that, we decided that because there's dance involved, that we also want to give them different variables to play with. So the slick at the moment is like, and Mike can definitely comment more on this, is the fact that essentially split it in half. So one side would have one particular patch, the other side would have a different patch. And you also could do 3 with a mix, but Mike decided to do the 2. So with that, the sound design then became, okay, literally I have in my studio 5 circles with slices down. Again, I'm no dancer whatsoever, but as a composer, I had to move. I had to place, what would it feel like if I was walking through the space, and what would I want, right? So that kind of that physicalizing of this sound space really informed the way that I wanted to sound. And what resulted in that was I have to have dichotomies. So a shorter duration married to a longer duration. So in this kind of sampling, you have this kind of cluster. So again, there's a synergy throughout of all of them. So you heard in that sample that you had like a percussive kind of element. Then you have one that's sustained. One of the other parameters that Mike and I decided to do was, okay, well, once the sound is activated, how long does the sound go for? What's the duration of that instance? So for example, if I approach, the longer I stay in the sound and the triggering sphere, the longer essentially the patch will continue, the duration. Do I want to have a quick If my hand's off, it deactivates that sound. So even having that duration play also gives a whole new rhythmic element. And again, almost like another extension. So again, if a dancer's going this way, there's a lot more, almost they're shaping, they could really play and have this kind of synergy with this object. So it's not so much of a delay in that. And so we also agreed that because of this, of the particular setup and the scenario of this performance, we also came up with a solution that we wanted, once the sound is activated, sound's not activated, then when it's reapproached, it goes back to the top of the beginning of the patch. So again, adding to that sense of kind of this problem solving kind of element. So again, but it can still explore. So again, keeping long or short. One other option that Mike came up with in terms of the technology is the fact that, let's say one dancer activates one side, well, another dancer or that same dancer can interrupt that sound too as well. So again, you can have this really interesting play. So again, you're essentially giving the dancers all of essentially their scale. You're giving them all the materials for them to play with. And what I found fascinating is I wanted that the sound changed. And I found what I loved in the performance was the displacement in each one of those, and each one of the slick setups had a specific patching. So like one, I knew what one is, so the Venus corner, 2 is going to have these, 3, 4, 5. So even in the space, as an audience member, your experience, listening experience varied from the person across the space. So it was really interesting to talk to audience members afterwards saying, hey, that sound was not as prevalent in my space. So again, giving these kind of variable different listening environments. But again, what I found fascinating is when silence was used and where the moments in which the dancers were away from these objects. You also play with different textures. And so it was very interesting to see this kind of this piece develop with having very much present, sound mark sounds, the signal sounds, then also seeing how the different fabrics would play almost in the foreground. So depending on where you're sitting in that particular area. So this piece was a really interesting experiment in also with dance, with light, and also playing into the environmental side of the work. Luminescence is when light's actually triggered in the space. So as a composer is trying to navigate, one, what do we want to do with this buffet? What are the possibilities? 2, realistically, what's the setup? How's that going to work? 3, that setup, how is the setup going to inform composer on creating of these environments and what you want to have presented? And also 3, like John Cage, Begin Anywhere. What happens? What happens if you throw this up and it becomes essentially an extension of the body? So the definitely difference between the 2 pieces, IO, which we'll be doing for Camp Ground 24, versus at this piece, Luminescence, that Luminescence, the interactability and the intention was very direct intention, to the point where as a dancer, I'm approaching this to create a particular instance. So that was, in a way, you created a slick instrument. So that's been, as a composer, really fascinating to play all these different layers to explore.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Any questions? I think there's some question or comments from the chat, but I want to actually ask if Ben or Kevin has any question.
I think I have like 5, but I don't want to monopolize this time. Actually, Kevin, do you have anything to ask? Because I can follow up.
No, go for it, Ben.
All right. Well, I'll pare it down to just a couple for now, but I have a question first for Mike, and this has to deal with the technical side of things, as I've been involved with very similar projects with very similar kinds of technology, though taking a very different form. So you mentioned that that OSC messages can be sent from the slicks to any device or piece of or application that can accept said messages. But can the different like components of the slick themselves be controlled via OSC?
They could. It all depends on the software that you write to accompany a particular performance. But they can receive OSC messages over the internet. And so there's no reason why they can't respond both by changing, the lighting in some way, or by playing different sounds or generating sounds on it. And in fact, because of this experimentation that Leslie and I did for this past performance, I realized that these slicks are really underpowered computationally for what I would really like to do. And so I am gonna replace those ESP32s with Raspberry Pis.
Yeah, makes
And
sense.
actually be running Super Collider on the slick itself, so that it just opens up a whole new richness of things that you can exploit with it. And hopefully, my target is sometime over the summer have this up and going.
Well, as an avid user and teacher of Super Collider myself, you certainly have my attention.
Okay.
And so for the luminescence performance, I'm presuming then that you just wrote an application in C++ or in for the ESP32?
Yes, I just wrote it in C++. In the Arduino IDE.
Great. And then, well, thank you for answering those questions. And then, Leslie, I have a question for you. So something that struck me as really cool in how you approach luminescence is really this like being mindful of not only the interaction between dancers, like human beings and these devices, but also of the resulting textures, both of color and of sound. And I'm kind of curious, and maybe you did, and either I just missed it or just or what, but have you considered maybe for a future project, um, like maybe scheduling or finding ways to alter how the interaction works, and sometimes maybe flipping it so that uh like the instead of the dancers controlling, like nullifying or exciting these sticks, that instead the sticks are already performing that, and then the dancers can play off of the sticks, and then have that dynamic switch, and kind of have this rotational form of who's really interacting with what.
Great question. And absolutely, I know that's something Mike's been wanting to do too. It's like essentially them being they are the omnipresent figure, sound source in this space. But I think it would idea that it's almost this questioning of who's activating who, kind of idea
Exactly.
that which I love. I've done that similar kind of magicianship, right? Idea, like you don't know when it's playing. In like one of my pieces did Unplugged, where the pianist, you really don't know when she's playing and the sound. So I love playing with that audience perception, but it's definitely something to absolutely explore. Absolutely. And I think with the time frame we had, I went kind of the more simplistic approach in that, but absolutely. Again, that's been really as you say, like Ben. Meet Mike. It's be fun. As another composer, it's great. But yeah, no. And I also found was interesting afterwards. I talked. A lot of dancers were there, and their friends were there. And what was really interesting was how, like, dancers asking, "Oh, how just the different capabilities of it." For example, one was a Twitch dancer, and going, "Okay, could it activate this way, or could it behave this way?" So, yes, again, having the conversation going, what can it do? But yes, I love the idea of having this, sonic field, but really it's who's running the show kind of piece. I like it. I might steal it, Ben. Thank you.
Hey, feel free.
Yeah, Ben, do you have any follow-up questions?
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Actually, let's go to if Kevin doesn't have any questions, let's go to the comments in the chat.
Okay. Well, this is an amazing endeavor. The combination of dance, light, and music is amazing. So that was very nice. Thank you so much. And let's see, how does the more accomplished learning curve dancers find the light biodynamics of the sound mass? The creator introduced the idea of ultrasonic. That was the question from the chat. I mean, what I observed at the performance, it was they kind of jump into the experiment right away, because it was they never actually seen Slick before the performance. They only got to try actually just right before the performance, so they get to know what it is. And then it was the performance, and there's some part of dance was choreographed. I think those were duets and some quartet and quintet. But other than that, it was mostly improvised. So I think they did a great job responding and also figuring out this the sound installation. So yeah, that was fun. But do you have any other comments, Leslie, or anyone else?
I love the variable of the dancers had a pre-set idea, but when you bring in this external entity as a performer, how do you react, right? And that would have been a really interesting conversation to have with the performers going, okay, what was your experience being in this environment? How did the particular slick or the sound coming from that slick influence your performance? So I found that, during one of the performances, I was focusing on the near slick to me, and I was following, I could tell that he was almost playing with it more, activating the sound more. So again, how he interacted, I think, was really, really wonderful. So as a composer, I liked the variable that they hadn't played around with these sounds before, and what happens, how do you navigate the space, and in terms of that kind of idea. So this particular piece, having that was really interesting. I think I would believe the next step would be really interesting to see what would happen if you have premeditated. So for example, as choreographers sit down and with Mike, myself, and Kevin, that'd be a cool, we'll bring your percussion in, but into what would that piece look like, and that intention. So as a performer, knowing what's going to come up or what's going to be activated, I think that's a completely different performance headspace, I feel, in that kind of space. But yes.
Yeah, it was actually dubbed by the John Cage's piece, but performed by USF Percussion Ensemble. So we kind of locked out in terms of programming for this concert, but I think Kevin probably has something to talk about in terms of programming and how this John Cage piece actually could be overlapped.
Sure. So when Unmi was talking about the idea of doing this concert, the first thing that we tried to figure out is what's a cool space that can accommodate something like this. And we decided that since these posts create an environment for people to exist in, that we could go outside into a different space that could allow the audience to experience it from all around. And then when we were programming the rest of the thing, some of this happened on accident, but then we started finding basically a theme that was based on the environment. So this John Cage piece we played, but what about the noise of crumbling paper, is an environmental work. So it's mimicking the sounds of nature, but also the percussion ensemble was surrounding the audience. So while they were all getting a different experience from which slick they were closest to, they were all getting a different experience from which percussionists were around them as well. And the Anthony Green piece, 10 Textures, we also surrounded the audience by that piece. So basically, it's 10 different ideas with different combinations of instruments that each player is playing a cell, and basically where you're sitting and how long the piece is going, you're just hearing different sounds. Oh, power just went out. Different sounds appear and disappear and change throughout. We overlaid a piece of text from Anthony Green as well that talked about his thoughts on the environment and environmental issues. And then we opened the concert with the piece, The Ice is Talking by Vivian Fung, which is all played on ice blocks and has obvious allusions to the environmental impacts of us on it. So we stumbled into a great concert program as it started to unravel itself.
Thank you. Yeah, there's one more question from the chat. How many slicks can work together at one time? Well, we used 5 for this particular concert, but I think you can probably, Leslie or Michael can talk about that a little bit more. Also, all the light colors coordinated with the pitch variables. That's another question.
So we built 7 slicks, and that was enough, for us to get a handle and to learn and experiment with. It took an entire month over the summer for me to, once I had prototyped and actually developed the device, then it took a month to fabricate them all in my garage. I don't think I could have stood making more of them on it, but time and money were the limitations on that. But there's not a technical limitation on how many slicks could interact with each other. From that regard, that's not a problem. And in terms of attaching the lights and the sound, you can certainly do that. If you are creative enough and you're a good enough programmer, you could do that. We took some fairly simple, unfortunately, they're hard to photograph because they're very bright. And so most cameras can't deal with the high dynamic range of the devices and then the background on it. So when you saw that video, the color was very bled out. It was very faded. And so the still image that I showed with the rainbow hues on it, that's more like what they look like when you're actually there experiencing them. They can be very pretty. The colors can be very nice. And so really it's a limitation on creativity. And my creativity is of the engineering sort, not so much the artistic light design sort. I would love to have collaborations with people who are much more creative in the visual arts than I am, to work with them to have them do more interesting visual things. And they can certainly be either programmed ahead of time to statically go through a sequence of colors and patterns, or you could if the slick, if you had other performers, if they were together with an orchestra, for instance, or just a few musicians, the slicks have that microphone in them, and they can respond and to the ambient sounds of the environment there. So there's all kinds of possibilities of what you could do with those lights in response to sound.
Thank you. Well, we're very excited to have Slick again during our festival. And if you, Michael and Leslie, if you can tell the audience here and to us what we can expect for this upcoming performance. It's gonna be at the opening concert of Campground 24, which happens in Tampa from March 14th to 16th. So it will be on March 14th at the Tampa's Project's Tampa's Art Gallery in Ybor City. So yeah, what should we expect?
Expect play. We encourage this as a living work. Its purpose is for you to play. And what's so wonderful about when you think about new music concerts or any music concert, the idea that you actually interact and play around with the sound source and sound substance is really unique. And having Campground program a piece like this is really exciting. It's something really, as an audience member, to literally have fun and play and interact, and this piece will be guiding you from one to another. So I'd say you have something to look forward to. Join us.
We're looking forward to hosting it. Absolutely.
Yes, yeah, it will be great. Michael, any thoughts? Anything we should expect?
Well, it will be put in the common area as you're walking through from one part of the venue to the next. And the idea is that as you pass by them, it will activate the sounds on it. And so just take a moment to try activating there's a different sound on each of the 7 slicks that will be there. And these are going to be the environmental sounds that Leslie recorded in Mauritius, along with some tonal overlays to it. So don't be shy to play with them as you go through the space. And if you have ideas, we'll be there and we'll love to hear them and perhaps generate some new collaborations out of this.
Great, yeah, thank you so much. We're certainly really looking forward to our opening night on March 14th. It's Thursday night, 7:30 in Ybor City at Tempest Project. So hope to see everybody. It's gonna be really fun concert and very exciting. So yeah, actually, Ben and Kevin, if you can share what will be also on the program for the opening night, that will be great, because we also have Ben's piece. You will get to try the first thing you enter the venue, and then also Kevin and USF Percussion Ensemble is preparing for world premiere. So yeah.
Well, my contribution to the festival this time, instead of putting on a performance of live coding, I instead am placing that in the audience's hands, literally. So, but no coding will be involved, but it's going to be the full version of what I had performed last year at camp, which is this and I also performed in one of our online concerts. It's a piece of narrative live coding called Tabby Star. but I'm fleshing it out into a full interactive fiction storyline where you can go in front of the installation. There will be a touch screen. It will be themed as if you're in front of a monochromatic teletype terminal, and you progress through the story as I'm not going to spoil too much, but let's just say there are interesting things out there amongst the stars, and as you progress through the story and navigate down the various branching paths, the piece that will be played is more than just sound effects. It's actually a piece of electroacoustic music, and your choices and the direction of the story influences how the piece itself unfolds.
All right, and then I'll be joined by USF percussion members to play a new piece by John Libertor that is going to feature violin soloist Sini Virtanen. So, and then the percussion ensemble will also be playing a piece called Sunder for percussion quartet by Stephen Montalvo. And there's a lot of percussion on this first concert, but another thing that you can look forward to is saxophonist Catherine Weintraub and I playing a piece that has a live conductor, and the conductor is a video game that the audience will watch and we will interpret. So some exciting things.
So there are 2 games on the concert on the program. So it'll be and then you can play with Slick with IO. So I mean, this is going to be probably one of the most fun concerts that anybody will have ever gone to or will ever go to.
Yeah, it's gonna be new music playground or new music amusement park.
I like New Music Playground. We should have
New
made that
music
as a
playground,
tagline.
yeah, playground, new music playground and campground. So yeah, so excited to see you everybody in March in person. That's great. But thank you everyone for coming tonight and of course sharing about Slade, Leslie, and Michael. And so yeah, thank you. And I think we'll call it the night. So thank you so much, everybody, and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.